we are here to bring you everything and anything surrounding Porsche. I'm Mike.
I'm Aaron.
And this is P-Car Talk. Like I said on the intro, we're here to bring you everything and anything related to Porsche. But before we get started, maybe a little bit about myself and Aaron, who we are, what we drive, not inundating you guys with a ton of stuff, but just give you a little bit of background so we're not two yahoos just talking about Porsche stuff and you're wondering who we are. I'll go ahead and get started. We're really passionate about Porsche. That's why we decided to make this P-Car Talk. And we go to events. We go to a lot of things around the U.S. We know quite a few people within the industry. And, we're always talking shop anyway. So why not start a podcast, right? So back to who I am. I'm currently driving a 964 1990 C2, heavily modified with a lot of stuff. And that's my daily gigs. Next car on the agenda, going to hang on to that, but going to try to go for a GT3 for myself. And that's about it in the car stable. I mean, I'm an air-cooled guy at heart. Like anybody, I think the progression, you make your way to Porsche. I didn't start with Porsche. I wasn't fortunate enough to start when I started driving with a Porsche in the stable, as many of you probably didn't have as well. But the goal, I think always for me was to end up with Porsche. How about you, Aaron?
Yeah, that was the same for me. I didn't start that way either. I was a muscle car guy. So 83 El Camino was the first.
Nice.
305 didn't stay.
Rocking the mullet.
Well, not quite. I mean, I definitely, I could have. I definitely could have had another V8 in there, put a small block 400 in there. Moved on from that. I got into Volkswagens, did the Volkswagen GTI thing.
Yeah, I think you and I both had that in common, right?
Yep.
Like we had the Volkswagen thing.
And that's where it starts.
Yeah, I think that once you get that Volkswagen in you, I think it, when you start to get a little bit more successful in life or what have you, and your goals start to align, you start working towards that pinnacle of Porsche. And I think, if you ask a lot of Porsche guys, right, a lot of them have VW roots, huh?
Yep.
Yeah.
Still own them, still like them.
Exactly, yep. Right. Yeah. So what are you driving, Aaron?
Right now I got a 2006 997.
Nice.
0.1. So I'm dealing daily with that IMS bearing that hasn't been changed yet.
Flirting with death, huh?
It is. Every day.
Well, rocking that water-cooled status. So do you have any interest in air-cooled stuff?
I do. I mean, before I got the water-cooled, I was really going towards air-cooled. I was like, I'll pick up a 964. That was back when the market was it was nice and a little lower than it is now. Not 400% markup, but
yeah, absolutely.
I didn't do it. Didn't pull the trigger. I thought it was a little high at the time. When I was living in Germany, I was like, It was still kind of hard.
Failed to contrary belief. It got higher, huh? Like,
yeah, I was like, no, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, but, there's no way it's gonna get more expensive, right?
Yeah, that's true. All day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's actually cooling a little bit though, huh? The market on the air-cooled side at least.
It definitely looks like it is. I'm seeing those prices drop, not on the daily, but it's
kind of trending.
Was,
specific models are still holding their own. Obviously don't get mad at us, air-cooled guys out there. We're air-cooled fans too, but I'm sure if everybody's, has their pulse on the market like we do, we have noticed some cooling trends. Obviously there's not going to be a huge dip in the market where everything's going to fall to the bottom, although we would love that, right? We could just buy more of them.
Yes, more is better. As many P cars as I can handle.
Yeah,
love that.
Absolutely. But I'm going to dabble into the water cool. Like I mentioned earlier, I'd like to get a 997 GT3. I think the best of both worlds, have an air cooled car and a water cooled car. Of course, I'd love to have everything, but that's not really realistic. We're 9-to-5ers. We're not YouTubers by trade or podcasters, either by trade. So, I mean, this is kind of a passion project for us. So we still got to check in the next day at work and do all those things and get the bills paid that way. So, unfortunately, we can't have a warehouse full of cars yet.
Well, that's the goal.
Yeah.
But, I mean, maybe together.
Good goals, right? Yeah. Good goals to have. But yeah, I think I've noticed, certain models. I mean, I want to say even 997 GT3s have cooled a little bit too. I think that, the panic maybe where everybody's got to have one or, everybody feels like, the sand is running out of the jar and they got to get one. I think that's kind of everybody's kind of got one and has one. And, now we maybe have aspirational people, like ours that are going after a second or third or fourth car possibly, and they're like, "Well, I got a Porsche right now. I can kind of wait a little bit, you know."
I mean, yeah, the GT3 is definitely there. It's oh man, that's a lot of. It's easy to want that because it seems it's the most attainable GT3. That's not crazy like the 996, so it's not as hairy. It's a little bit more nanny
Yeah,
controlled, but
exactly.
it's
We got to
still
be
good
careful
fun.
talking about it though, right? You know how these things go. You know, everything goes viral. You start talking about it either on YouTube or podcast, and then the market goes nuts. And you know, like those guys, you know, in New York, it have the car club. You know, they talk about something, and next thing you know, it shoots up 20-30%. So don't go buy 997 GT3s. They are horrible, horrible cars. Do not buy them.
I mean, if we were responsible for that, I'd be okay. But
yeah, I know. Lofty aspirations that we would be responsible for such market changes, right?
that's for sure.
But that'd be a good thing if we could do something like that. That would be great. You know, segueing into, since we were talking about air cooled and water cooled quite a bit, do you think there's a hard line in the sand between those two groups? Do you think that, oh, I'm only an air cooled guy, or oh, hey, you know, the new school guys are all the water cooled guys. You're not a real Porsche guy because the cars have gotten bloated, they've gotten big. What are your thoughts on that?
I definitely think that's some for some there is a line because you've only been an air cooled guy. Why would you go? Why would you do anything else? There's definitely something special about those cars, as can be seen by the market we just talked about going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
There's something special about everything to do with those. I mean, and it's nostalgia from from the time they were first built to now, and it's just a
Yeah,
unique experience.
and they're not making any more of them,
Yep.
right?
Nope.
That's
Well,
the mantra. Oh yeah,
well, it's not. I
yeah.
mean, whenever Porsche wants to make
Stipulation:
one,
if we're gonna find a parts bin 993 turbo to make, we're gonna go ahead and make one of those, right?
exactly. We just found one on the shelf, and we
Yeah.
figured we got some extra parts. Let's
If you guys don't know what we're leading on to, at if you guys missed it at Rennsport or in the news, that Porsche made another 993 without a VIN, and they brought it out at Rennsport, this past Rennsport Aaron and I were at. And interesting car, interesting build. Understand the ethos and the, you know, to kind of say, hey, this is what Porsche Classic can do. I can kind of understand the exercise that they were doing in that standpoint. Not necessarily the color I would have chose. I think that's the roundabout feeling around Rennsport, right? The color on that car.
Yeah, I'm the gold. Not a. I like gold.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know that I like that color. I mean, I would be more leaning towards the actual last Vend 993, and that's called nicknamed Last Waltz by some Belgian guys that are taking care of it.
Beautiful car. We got to see that too
blue.
at Rennsport. Was that a midnight blue metallic? I think
I
paint
believe
on
so.
that.
Yeah.
Great car. Great car. Yeah, and I think there was a little bit of back and forth. They had their sleeves rolled up, ready to go if they were going to VIN that car at a Porsche, weren't they?
Yeah, that was the talk. They have the full document stating that this is the last 993 turbo to be ever built and signed by Porsche and everything. And they had a very big build book and very passionate about how that was going to be approached with what Porsche was doing with the 993 coming back.
Yeah.
For that one car and how they were going to auction it.
Yeah, thankfully it didn't get to, you know, where it got into that legal battle or what have you. And
if it did, it wasn't public at all.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it went that way. I mean, I'm not speaking from anything other than just I saw what the car sold at auction and I saw where it went. I think it went to the Middle East, if I'm not mistaken. And you know, I know Aaron knows, and I know. I don't know if you guys know out there, but kind of anything goes out there. So it's not like this car is not going to be on the road. So
yeah, it's just
you know what I mean.
It's one of the dailies.
Yeah, it's not like a Saudi prince isn't, or you know, a Kuwaiti prince isn't going to be allowed to drive this car. It's not like that he's going to get apprehended or anything like that, like he would in the U.S. or somebody would, you know.
Nope, no rules.
Yeah, exactly. So
just enjoyment.
You know, if you're ever out there, you know, combing the desert, you may see that last 993 turbo out there. But yeah, I think as far as going back to the air cooled guys and the water cooled guys, I think some of the old school air cooled guys feel that way, and the reason why I bring that line in the sand up, you know, I'm on the Pelican forum a lot, reading a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of old school air cooled guys on there. And not saying that they don't like water cooled, because I'm not making that claim at all, but I just their hearts are in air cooled, as is mine. I had a ton of air cooled VWs. I still have an air cooled VW. I had a 61 VW split window bus, and for me, that's the pinnacle. A Porsche air cooled of any era. You pick it anywhere from a long hood to a short hood. A 964, 993, you name it. We could go through every single model, but you get the point. Um, I think every car guy, at least Porsche car guy, wants to have one of those in their stable, and then anything else that comes after that is probably bonus. Don't you agree?
I do agree with that. It's once you obtain the Porsche brand, normally, and if it's not through air cooled first, it's definitely in your mind always like, yeah, I gotta get some air cooled there.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta try it out.
Yeah, and I do feel that's a common feeling. I think it's almost kind of like, you want to earn your stripes, right? It's like, hey, I got an
Yep.
air cooled car, and you're like, hey, okay, hey, you're all right with me. You got an air cooled car too. It's like, almost kind of feel that way if you meet and I hate to globalize it and say younger people, because that's not true, because there's older people that have water cooled cars too. But when you meet a guy and his only car is maybe a water cooled car, and he's like, yeah, I got a Porsche, and I have this, and you're like, oh, cool, I got an air cooled car, and he's like, oh, okay. And you don't get any response. You kind of like taken back. You're like, are you really a Porsche guy, or are you just kind of like a car guy who ended up with a Porsche? Like, what's going on here? One kind of a strange feeling sometimes when you run into a guy like that. Just in the general populace. I'm not talking like at a show or something like that, or you know. Have you ever run into anything like that with anybody before? I know
Yeah,
you.
I mean, there's definitely some people that you think maybe they need a little bit more education on the topic. That just they just have a Porsche and they're not in it like
Yeah, not passionately involved,
like
right?
you expect, like you're in it. So
Yeah, exactly. Where you sit there and you say, "Hey, I love this stuff," and you start getting onto them, and it looks like you got lobsters crawling out of your ears. And he's like, "I
exactly.
have no idea what Rennsport is. I have no idea what that Rolex 24 is. I've
What
got
do you
no
mean you
idea."
don't know what a 917 is?
Yeah,
What do
I
you
don't.
mean you don't know what a
Yeah,
962 is? What do you mean you don't know about the
yeah,
Jägermeister car?
exactly. It's like
Exactly. Yeah.
it's like this passion we have is consumes our lives, and we expect everybody with a Porsche to be in the same room, but not always the case, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know all your colors, Viper green or and anything like that, or debates about what colors
Yeah,
what. This
yeah,
those things. It's just passionate details you start getting into, and I definitely agree.
yeah.
It's once you get into the mark, you're like, well, I got a Porsche. Well, your next level, if you're not already there getting the air cooled, that's your
Hmm.
next checkbox.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And yeah, not to ostracize anybody who's in that realm, but just saying, hey, this program maybe could educate you as well. So that'd be a good thing, where we're going to talk all about models and all type of different stuff, and what's significant and why is it significant, and like I said, anything and anything, all Porsche. We're going to talk about, the models that never get talked about too. Like everybody always scrapes the surface on talking about maybe like a Cayman or a GT4. Like they get a little bit of love, but then they kind of just, like, oh yeah, they're great cars, they're great driving cars, and that's about it. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting. I just think that some guys are so hardcore, and I don't know if it's mainly because it's, maybe they've gotten to a later stage in life, I guess, that's the way I'm trying to look at it. I'm trying to politically say that. I'm not trying to say you're old people. I'm just saying, or I'm old even. I'm just saying, hey, you're later in life. Maybe you've always had air cooled Porsches, and you just don't want to step over that line and get a water cooled car. And you're like, and then the mantra behind maybe air cooled, if you're a water cooled guy, it's like, oh man, I don't want to pay for that maintenance. It's like, hey, top end rebuild. Speaking of Matt Farah doing a top end rebuild, I did a top end rebuild this year in early 2000. Well, now it's 19, but
Yep.
early 2018 on my 964 unexpectedly. So boom, there's some money out of the pocket. And maybe that's part of it too. Like some guys want reliability, some guys don't want to have to mess with that stuff.
Yeah, but I mean that goes both. There's still like we said, the 996 and the early 997 still have possibly an IMS issue, and that has to get fixed. And some of them to crack it open and get everything fixed is just as expensive as a top end rebuild for sure.
Yeah, that's true. That's very, very true. And then you know, then there's the tricky thing when you buy one. It says, "Hey, yeah, I've got it done, but I don't have any paperwork." You're like, "Oh, great! So I'm going to pay for this service twice, or am I going to trust you on this one, right?"
Well, that's how I leaped, and I kind of took that Magnus Walker approach, just
Yeah.
get it, and that's what I did. And I mean, it had some miles on it. It supposedly was driven by an 80-year-old guy, but I don't think he was driving it lightly because I heard that he had some stints at Sebring, and then he was buying a Z06 Corvette. So that just led me a couple details in there that I was like, okay, well, it was probably driven.
So although later in life, spry.
Yeah, he was still getting it. He was a fighter pilot, so he was living life.
Definitely had that fuel to fight there. Yeah, it's interesting. Nevertheless, like I think that and I bring up that whole being reliable thing, and that's one of the reasons I'm chasing a 997, GT3, because the Metzger engine and it's bulletproof, and I'm hoping to get one. It's already has coolant lines pinned and things like that, where I can just get on it and hammer it. I don't want to worry about a rebuild anytime
carefree
soon.
And just smashing it.
Yeah,
and yeah, that's the life.
Yeah, it's almost kind of like freeing to have something where you can do that, right? Where you're not always because after the top end rebuild in my car, I'll tell you what, after it was broken in and we adjusted the valves, there's nothing more freeing than that, because I was like, oh, I know I'm good for a long time. I'm gonna just go hammer it now.
I'm sure that had to be. Yeah. Oh yeah, we'll see how this IMS thing goes for me.
Drive it till it breaks, right?
Well, I mean,
you don't want to wait
it
for
should
that,
be
but
good. I mean, it's gotten good miles. I mean, we're over 100K in miles, so it should be just
yeah. That's the word, right? It's actually the lower mile cars that are scarier with that are in the IMS years, right? Because they haven't ran enough, and then it's like, okay, well, I don't know if it's going to happen, right? Like you almost kind of have a ticking time bomb. It's almost,
yeah. I mean, there's all kind of forums that say that. Normally it's like 30,000 miles and below, and then the 3.8 Carrera S's were more could be more susceptible to that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna drive it, do the regular maintenance, all the things that I should do, and
yeah.
see how I should be.
I think you should be fine too. I mean, I don't remember the exact number.
It's less than 1%, I think, for the 997s. 996s, there's different things.
Ungodly low number.
Yeah. For the amount of cars they made, yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess at that point, it's kind of, I don't want to say worth the risk, because nobody wants their car to grenade. But at the same time, it's like, it's almost kind of like it walks like a duck, it talks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So if it's got the miles that, it should be at high end, it should have already happened if it was going to happen, right? So it should be fine and things like that. And I don't know. I mean, I know that's been a subject where people have beat it to death and talked about it, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but it is kind of the boogeyman of that car, right? Like where people are like, oh, well, is the IMS done? Okay, well, I don't want it, and it's, it might be worth a risk if you're out there and you're trying to get into your first Porsche, you 100,000 mile Carrera or Carrera S of that model. And hey, it's worth the risk maybe,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nothing drives anything like the 911 drives. That's just it. That's fact.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's the gospel. It really is. I mean, we've been smitten by it. That's why this show even exists.
Exactly. So. All the traveling. I mean, some more background to us too. I mean, besides just being friends, we've been to I think we've been to every Porsche event this year.
Yeah,
that's happened together.
Yeah,
so that's why we end up talking Porsches all the time anyway. So
yeah, and to give you a little bit of geographical background, we're in South Florida, so I mean we're trekking out to the West Coast to go to these events, and we're trying to make as much as we can and go to as many of these events as we can. So that just shows our dedication on that end. And that's out of our pocket. I mean, that's not sponsorship money. That's just because we're fans, going to those things. So yeah, I'd encourage you, if you haven't been to any event like Rennsport or Works or any of those things, you really are doing yourself a disservice by not going there. And especially if you're listening to this, you're definitely a Porsche fan. Like, you are going to see the best of the best.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't know what to expect. It was my first Rennsport this year or last year, and that's the event. So if you only go to one event ever, only one time, Rennsport is the event to go to. It's unbelievable, the people that you could interact with. how they all love the brand just as much as
Unreal.
you do.
Unreal.
And then just the cars that are just sitting there out there, but then also on track.
And that's the great thing about it,
amazing.
right? That was the best thing about Rennsport is the pits where you got to get up and like, as respect, you're not going to touch the cars, but for a metaphor, you could literally touch the cars. That's how close they would let you, like you could picture inside, you could stick your hands inside and take a picture of the car. And then, there was track sessions, and the great thing, and Aaron and I both love it because we go to a lot of EMSA events and things like that. You actually see the cars in motion. This isn't a cars and coffee where it's just sitting there and it's a static display. They had those as well, but majority of the stuff were there, was the cars were running. And that was got your blood pumping, man. Wow.
Man, to hear the 917s, like, I mean, to hear a lot of stuff. And I've seen those cars what I feel like a million times. I've been to the museum so many times for the other things that we do, and that was cool to see them going on track, screaming. I mean, it's not like they weren't holding anything back in these cars. It felt like they were just going full bore the entire time, and during all the races. That's the other cool thing is they're actually in race classes. They're really racing against the other cars, and all the drivers that you grew up hearing about are there.
Absolutely.
Driving those cars they used to drive back in the
Yeah,
day.
Rod Emery was in a car.
Yep.
There was a couple other Porsche factory drivers in cars there. It was a great event. You know what I mean? And like I said, I challenge you guys out there if you haven't been to an event. I know a lot of you guys are out there because sometimes I see you guys out shows and you're like, well, it's the first time I've been out. It's like, well, I've had a Porsche for 30 years. It's the first time you've come out. And I'm like, come on, man, get out of the cave. I know some of the guys out there are recluses and stuff, but you're really, really doing yourself a disservice and doing the community a disservice by not bringing your vehicle out or at least attending the event too, because you're really missing out on some great content out there, right?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's some guys, they probably have a paint to sample.
Yeah.
Air cooled.
Hiding it and hoarding it, right?
One of one, something crazy, and they're just not enjoying
I mean,
it.
literally, there's a guy I could throw a stone from my house to his house, and I just found out this past year he's got a 930 turbo slant nose, and I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, yeah, okay. And I only saw it because it was in the driveway, and then he took it back inside. I'm like, how come I never see you anywhere, man? I'm just kind of in your face, like politely, but I'm like, hey, come on out, man. They got all this stuff around us. There's plenty of things for you to go to. It's not like we don't live in a huge metropolitan city. We're in Tampa. There's plenty of, cars and coffee events that you could go to. We're 2 hours away from Sebring, 2.5 hours away from Daytona, as far as like, the Rolex 24 or any of that stuff, and Amelia Islands in Jacksonville. And I'm just like, come on out, man, bring it out. I get some people just want to hoard stuff, but, show everybody what you have,
Yeah, he must have bought it right, and then saw the market go, oh, all right, well,
yeah,
it's just gonna stay here and keep low miles. What color's the?
It was a black one.
Yeah.
So, the guy was, I don't want to pass judgment. I didn't get to talk to him very long, but he was a early 30s type of guy. So I wonder if it was maybe a father to son passed down type of vehicle, and maybe he doesn't want to rack up the miles, or maybe, maybe it wasn't running right. We didn't really talk very long, but I tried to get him to come out there. He didn't seem very receptive, though. He probably thought I was trying to steal this sucker or something from him.
He might not be a car guy.
That's true.
That's
true.
And then not a Porsche guy. And then he was like you said, he may have just inherited this car, and he's like, I don't know.
It's just taking up garage space. He's like, ugh, I hate this thing.
That sounds like a conversation you need to have with him.
Yeah. I'm gonna probably be sharking around him, I'm sure, at some point, trying to get him either to maybe come off it or at least take the vehicle out would be a nice thing, That'd be a good thing to get out there. It's kind of wild that the point of where I was going, and not just rambling, is there's all types of stuff that you don't even know it's around town. Like when we went to a Cars and Coffee event, I want to say a few weeks ago, there's a guy with a 356C who lives a mile from my house. I didn't even know that car existed till we were both filling up at the gas station at the same time. I'm sitting there in my 911. He's sitting there in his 356 one morning. We're going to the same event. I'm like, what's going on?
Sounds like you have a bunch of Porsche people living around you, and you needed to go exploring.
Yeah, I know it. Everybody's with their private lives, and who knows what's going on. But, and like the point I was saying, get out there and get involved, guys. Like the Porsche community is big already, but there's plenty of room for everyone out there. And get out there and get to your events. Don't hide your cars. Get out there and drive them. Right? Porsche people drive their cars. Remember that.
Exactly. Like this was the can't remember the guy's name, but at the Rare Shades 2 event, there was a guy that had one of one Gulf Blue
Oh wow.
911, and him and his wife have been driving it everywhere. I think they live in it.
Okay. Was
But
it air cooled car?
yeah, air cooled car.
Okay.
Yeah, and it looked like a RS tribute to Ducktail.
Oh,
And stuff
nice.
Like that. So
Okay.
it was really good.
Yeah.
But they have 200,000 miles in that car.
Wow. Good for him.
Driven it everywhere.
Good for him. Absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
Love hearing stuff like that. Like high mileage awards. I like wear that stuff with a badge of honor, man. There are guys out there with we're not Corvette guys. Like don't brag about 3,500 miles on your car. Brag about 200,000 miles. Be like, man, I take this thing everywhere. I drive it everywhere. I drove it across country. Make stories with it, right? That's what it's for. I mean, that thing's a German tank. It's ready to go.
Exactly. And then there was another kid. He think he was mid-20s, and he got another blue one, but Aero blue. Just 911. I think he said he fixed a couple things on it. We didn't really get into everything, but he picked that up for like 22 grand. So
wow.
we're talking about I
wow. In this market, is that a
yeah.
recent purchase?
Yeah, that was recent. He had bought it. I think he said
again
within the month.
Again, cooling market, right? Cooling market. So yeah, I think it's still going to cool a little bit. I think I was talking earlier today with a friend of ours. Again, I should have been recording, but just chatting on the phone for about 20, 30 minutes. And it was GT3 talk because he knows I'm interested in one. And we're talking about 2019 and the moving year and thinking about how the market's moving as far as Porsche is, specifically talking about 911s. And he was saying he just think it's going to cool a little bit more. And I agree with him. I think it's going to cool a little bit more too. I think those, 997 GT3s, they're hovering for, I would say a cherry example, maybe 4,000 miles, around 120, 125,000, and, ranging anywhere from down to 85,000 with something with kind of high miles, like 40,000 miles. I think maybe those things will come down a hair. I don't think they're going to plummet. I think maybe the sweet spot will be settling right around 90. I think for a car with 15,000 miles, not too many over revs, nothing crazy like that. But I would love for it to be lower.
I think everyone would love for that too. But I mean, I don't know. With the 992 and everybody talk about how big it is, and then some of the aesthetic things that they don't like, but that's with every new car.
Yeah.
But I mean, that could drive 997 prices.
Yeah, let's run with that a little bit. I'm glad you brought that up because, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, are you with the masses as far as feeling the car's kind of bloated, kind of big? Do you like it? What are your thoughts on that?
I haven't got to see one in person, so I can't. I mean, that probably might change it, but I mean, from everything I've seen, scale and things when it's sitting next to other things, it does look like a pretty big car.
Yeah.
But again, it's always bigger because they need extra traction. They want it to handle and be better than it was last generation.
Yeah.
And they see that. And what is it mostly for? It's mostly for race cars and that type. I mean, but I think it's cool. I think that's good that they changed it up. I like the interior, the little shifter that everybody keeps commenting.
What is it? The Braun electric shaver, people are calling it. And
I would use the flappy paddle side probably once it's in. I mean, if I went that direction. But yeah, as far as the outside, I like it. It doesn't bother me too much. I mean, but I do agree that they're getting bigger and bigger. When does that size stop? That's the question. I mean,
that's a great question because I've wondered that myself too. Because they come out with a new model, and I understand because of crash standards, everything changes, but not necessarily every model year. But like they add different things into the car, and it changes the outlook, and it makes it grow a little bit, and it gets a little bit bigger. But obviously, 911's the pedigree, right? So where does that growing end? Does it continue? I mean, as long as the generations continue to develop, does a car continue to get bigger, even if it's just millimeters bigger? And someday we have something as big as a 1970s Lincoln Mark 8 or something, and it's like this huge boat. I mean, do we get to that point? Hopefully not, right?
Yeah, I mean that's true. And then how close are they going to get to going mid-engine versus rear?
Yeah.
And if it goes mid-engine, does it get smaller?
Yeah. Good point. Good point. And I know you've heard of it. There's that empty spot in there, right, in the car where they've developed where you could stick the battery in someday when they turn this 911 into a hybrid, right? So that could be a little bit of the growth, the secret compartment inside the car where a battery and a motor goes, to make it a hybrid. And they've already developed the chassis that way. So there's basically almost kind of waiting for the grumblings of the masses of 911 followers to not, burn them at the stake for bringing out a hybrid 911. But I think that's coming.
Well, we'll see. I mean, we saw at Rensport that one company where they used their electric boost, is
Yeah.
essentially what it is, electric supercharging in between the motor and the transmission.
Good point. Yep.
And that's giving an extra 175 horsepower, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, in air cooled world,
Yeah. It's insane,
it's a
right?
good size. I mean,
Yeah.
the cost will definitely come down once the technology is there.
Yeah. And
Still,
then,
I thought was pricey for what it was, but I mean, it's cool technology.
yeah, absolutely. I agree. And we got to see that as well. And what he's talking about is kind of an aftermarket electric system, if you can imagine. And it goes into the flywheel area and it helps spin up the car and, has regenerative on it. And like you said, it gives you all that additional horsepower. Definitely interesting stuff coming down the pipe with that. But, I don't know how many traditional air cooled guys will go for that just because they probably don't want that in their car. But you have heard a lot of people, it's like, oh my God, I'm building a 3.8, motor. I'm punching it out, or I'm going to do a short stroke. 30, 40, $50,000 later, they have their motor. Well, maybe they don't need to bore the motor out anymore. Maybe they drop 50 grand on this electric thing if the price comes down a little bit. And
Yeah, I
then they
think
don't.
it's quite a bit more than that right
No,
now.
yeah, I
but
think it was what? I think it was 75 actually,
I think it
something
was
of that
75
nature.
for one piece of it, and I think there was another cost for the battery piece as
Okay.
well. But then there's added weight. So now, yeah, I've got 100 and something more horsepower, but now I have a battery sitting in the front that's
Yeah.
4 times what I had weight wise in
Yeah.
the front. I mean, there's the battle. I'm sure they've thought about that. But
Yeah. Yeah, and as many of you out there, and as we know, the it seems like the debate with the air cooled car is if you have one and you want to go faster, how much stuff can I take out of the car, right? Like what can I take everything out? Do I even need a driver's seat? Can I just sit on a milk crate? You know what I mean? It's almost kind of like
lightness.
yeah,
That's where we want it.
it's just
Exactly.
kind of that extreme, right?
It's race
like,
car.
It's race car, man. It's race car, bro. Milk crate, and I don't need a Recaro bucket. What do I say, 3 pounds? But at the end of the day, it's I don't think that market. I know they said they're developing stuff for air cooled cars, but I don't really see the success rate in that area, to be honest with you, because a couple of reasons why, right? Like one, if you pay to get it put in, then you got to pay to get kind of maybe taking it out, right?
How long does it last? And then, I mean, you're right on that.
Because then you're really narrowing your market on resale, right? Because I'll be honest with you, if I was on the market for an air cooled car and you told me that was on the car, I'd be like, yeah, that's really cool and good for you, but I don't want your car.
Yeah, because even though it's been developed for it, is it put more strain on the motor or less strain on the motor?
Exactly.
What is it? What else is it doing? Because Porsche didn't design
Yeah.
the motor to handle.
It's
that
almost
amount
kind of
of
like
extra
against the
horsepower.
grain too of purity, right? Like it kind
Exactly.
of goes against that.
That's where I was thinking too. I was like, well, if I'm not going air cool, if I'm not going water cooled as an air cooled guy, I'm definitely not going electric.
Yeah.
Is that worse? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
every time somebody talks hybrid, it's a sketchy discussion. But yeah, I mean, I
Yeah,
couldn't
it's each
see.
his own.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be people that I'm sure we'll see one, because there's plenty of people with more money than sense. So we'll see what happens out there. I mean,
I liked riding one. I think it'd be cool.
oh yeah. I mean, I think it'll be outstanding. I think it's a great engineering exercise. I think that's a great job by that company by making that. And I think their success rate is going to really be in the water cooled market, though, right? Like
It would
maybe
have
like
to be.
like a Carrera, for example, like yours. Like okay, well, I don't want to strap a turbo on. I don't want to pay for a supercharger, but I really love this car. I've got the IMS done, and I'm going to hang on to this car forever. I don't think you're really defacing anything at that point by putting that piggyback electric system in that car.
Nope.
By doing it at that point.
I agree with that. I don't think so either. That'd also be a cool point. I mean, it's not having to worry about reliability on the turbo side or going
Exactly, right.
supercharger. But I mean, BF Engineering and those guys, they make some good stuff. So
Absolutely, right. And so I think it
it's not
really
like it's not reliable.
it's just an option, right? Like
Yeah.
now instead of supercharger turbo, it's like supercharger turbo electric motor, right? Now it's
Exactly.
like you got
Instant power.
yeah, you have three things now, right? Like you can choose from. So it's an interesting development within the community, I would say. Speaking of, the new car, my opinion on that, rolling back a little bit, I, I think it is too big too. And again, I haven't seen one in person. I know I'll probably see one, at I'm going to be heading to the Rolex here in a few weeks down the road, and I'll probably see one there. If not, I'm sure we'll see one at another event we're going to in South Florida called DRT. So I'm sure they'll be out there, and we'll definitely get to put our hands on it and see one in person. You know what and my biggest takeaway with the new car is not even just the size. Yes, it looks bigger, but I think it looks clean. It's a good looking car. It's a Porsche product. It's beautiful, of course it is. Um, but again, it goes back to that line in the sand, how we started the show off, of our topic. You know, I feel like they're moving further and further away from, their air cooled roots, right? And some of those guys that are really those motorsport hardcore guys, you know what guys I'm talking about. It just gives them even more reason to distance themselves from the current 911, right? They're just like, well, it's even bigger. Like, what? Why?
Yeah, I mean it does, but it's also another talking point to why mine's worth a little bit more now. Mine's the right size. I've got the right motor.
Right.
Mine's dead reliable because of this reason. Mine has this pedigree here.
Yeah, mine's special because
it's
fill in the
special.
blank, right?
Yeah, the specialty that keeps your. I mean, even with the water cooled market, the more that with the 997, I think is the perfect size car. I mean, 996.
Not biased at all.
Not at all. But I mean, versus the other cars, and I would like. I'm sure that the market's going to come up too once.
Absolutely,
But I mean,
I agree with that. I think the sweet spot. I think for, and I'm not saying you're not a Porsche purist by any means if you buy a new car, but I feel like the thoroughbred Porsches are probably left with the 997 generation. After that, I just feel like it's just kind of maybe turned into more of a tour, a tour type car, minus the GT cars. I'm not talking about the GT cars. Obviously, that's on a different level. We're not going to go there. We'll save that for another episode. Trust me, we got plenty of content for that. But I think I'm just talking about base Carrera. Like, don't get me wrong, they're fast, but they're super comfortable too, right? You got a lot of amenities, and I mean, and I'm just comparing that to, generations prior to that. I mean, heck, you didn't even have a cup holder in a air cooled car. That didn't even exist. Like, you kidding me right now? Exactly. So now, and I think Americans are a little bit to blame for that. It's like, oh, where's my coffee place? Where am I going to put my stuff? And, I'll throw myself on the coals. It's not really me, but I guess I'm lumped in because it's my wife. She's like, that car doesn't even have a cup holder in it, talking about my 964. And I'm like, why do you need a cup holder? You're not driving that car ever. Like, you'll be in the passenger seat. Hang on.
Holding your cup.
Holding your cup. What's your hand doing? You know what I mean? Right. But anyways, it's just interesting, because that car, and like I was going to say before I kind of went on a tangent there, was that the 992, I feel like the price has just gotten unreal, right?
Like, have they always been that?
Is it in the stratosphere? And
that's not even the GT cars.
No.
I mean, they are the S's and 4S.
Yeah.
But
yeah, they are the top line. That's not for the base Carrera, but still, I think I watched a thing on YouTube. I don't remember who it was. I was just kind of browsing through somebody speccing a new one, right? Yeah. And he specced it, and I think it's pretty common spec. It wasn't anything wild, like pretty much everything anybody else would spec in the car, like sports seats with like nice stitching and things like that. And I think he went with like a carbon roof or maybe just a moon roof. I can't remember exactly the stats, but anyways, the point is that what he elected was $30,000 additional on top of the price. So, he was walking out the door at 185. I mean, that's
close to that's GT car territory.
That is GT car territory. I mean, granted, you're never going to be able to get a GT car allocation at sticker unless you're somebody, right? Unless you're bought every single GT car that's ever come out. Maybe you'll get one at sticker. You know what I mean? Like if you just want a regular GT3, but prior generation 991.2 GT3 cars we're MSRPing at 185.
Yeah.
So in a perfect world, if you didn't have to pay markup on it, you have a new Carrera, maybe 4S or C2S, being the same price as the prior GT3 car. Ooh, that's kind of.
Yeah, it's definitely up for discussion. I mean, I definitely would be. I mean, I'm not going to be cross shopping GT cars with an S or a 4S.
Yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer, right? If you're in that price
Exactly.
range, I mean, and we've talked about this. Like, what's another? I mean, I know it sounds ridiculous to say this and and pretty pompous, but like, I'm not buying it, but so I can say it. So I'm spending fake money at this point. But what's another $15,000, right? Like, if you spec a Carrera 4S at the new one and it's 185, and say you can get into a GT car at 205, why would you not buy the GT car? Really,
you're buying enjoyment. $15,000 of enjoyment.
Like from a depreciation level.
That's true.
I mean, that GT car is going to hold a lot better than that C4S would.
The fun level,
yeah, absolutely, right. But I mean, I get maybe not everybody wants that. Maybe somebody wants a softer, road car. So, but I mean, man, for $20,000 more, how do you not get the motorsport car? It's just kind of one of those things. It's like, are they pricing themselves out, in certain areas? And then the next question I have with that price point is, who's buying those cars? Like, seriously, like, I mean, who's giving money away like that? Like, am I just like have my blinders on? Everybody can go afford a $185,000 Porsche? I mean,
well, I mean, you either get that or, I mean, if I was going to spend that, I think I would have to put my money into the Sport Turismo.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like a lot more car for your money, right?
Like even that's base.
Yeah,
I think those are base.
Yeah, I think you're going over 200 after that thing's specced out. I mean, back in the day, I think that's another reason why air-cooled guys have a line in the sand, because back in the day, maybe, they had the stereotype of these cars were a doctor's car or a lawyer's car, somebody who is very precision based, right? But makes quite a, healthy living. But they weren't crazy expensive back then.
Or were they? And we just didn't realize it.
Yeah,
I mean, there's inflation and stuff.
Yeah, I know. Like they say, what they do the inflated price on what a 930 turbo was compared to nowadays. But I mean, I still think that now they are costing more than even they did even at the inflated prices back then. And then, I guess since they didn't cost that much to begin with, so they depreciated. I mean, you hear all these stories. I mean, I wasn't in the market at that time. I hadn't, gotten my Porsche or even think that I could afford a Porsche during these times. But, in the early 2000s, you hear guys of like, oh, you could have bought a 930 turbo for like 25 grand or and that wasn't like a beat down car. That was like a car that had like 15,000 miles on it.
Yep. A high end example of
Yeah, exactly. Right. And maybe even, you pay a little bit more and get a PTS example. It's like,
which would be
unreal,
would be
right?
Absolutely nuts. It would be. And the prices are definitely going up. I mean, who are they competing against? That's the question with those cars. And their bread and butter has always been the Cayenne, the SUV.
Yeah.
And now the Macan.
I just think that, they're pricing a lot of people out because, I mean, even if the people that can afford those cars, that are wealthy, most Porsche people are pretty intelligent people too. You know what I mean? They're crafty with their money. And I don't know if a lot of people see value in a $185,000 C4S. I just don't know if I don't see it.
Well, they could also be leasing it too. So there's that option, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it definitely builds a lot of credibility to buying used at this time, getting a better value for your money.
Yeah, right. And maybe it piggybacks on to where these people are going to these programs now, right? These car makers are saying, hey, the subscription-based stuff, because it's like, hey, no one can afford the car outright. So maybe they'll afford this $3,000 a month and they can drive a Macan turbo and they can drive the new 992 turbo when it comes out. And
they just swap it out the next year or 2 years or however long it lasts.
It's kind of a strange place we're going, isn't it? Like with cars in general and all that kind of stuff. Because I mean, when you talk about that number for a minute, like that $185,000, I mean,
a house for most people,
right?
I mean, average. I mean, that's house territory.
It's
at
insane.
Least most of the house.
Yeah, and then like prior generations, I think you could MSRP a Turbo S. Like I think they were at 187 or 189 out the door. Maybe, I mean, that's a Turbo S, man.
exactly, and then maybe a PTS on that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's and we're talking obviously options. That isn't like the entry level at that was the the price of what he optioned his out at. But like I said, most people would option that car out at that. It's just a strange era that they're going down. I just wonder, like, maybe that's why the used Porsche market is so heavy, and like where people are saying, hey, they make a great product when they're new and even when they're used, because Porsche people maintain their stuff. This is still a great used car. Like, I don't mind buying a 2008, C2S 997 because it's in great shape and it's got 40,000 miles on it, and I only paid 45 grand, and I didn't have to pay $185,000 for this thing.
So much money left over for all kind of mods.
Yeah,
And
to
parts.
go to events and
Yep.
enjoy it, right? Go drive it, and be carefree about it, not be like this precious thing in my garage at 185 grand, which also leads to, like, if you have 185 grand to spend on a Porsche and you're a Porsche guy, does that start to lead you into other brands because of that? Does that kind of push you away to say, I can go get a used Ferrari for 185 grand,
Easily talking. I mean, you could F430.
Yeah.
I mean, 458.
I think 458s
Yeah.
are less than 185 used now, even well maintained. I've seen some at 180, 190. So I mean, now are you having guys that are saying, "Hey, well, I can afford 185, but man, I could go get a 458, or I could get a C4S and it'd be the new kid on the block, and how long is that going to last for, or I don't know, it's just a strange thing. I know we went on a tangent there, but I like the car. Let's just put it that way. It just seems like a lot of money.
It is. I mean, you're talking to like we just said, the Sport Turismo's around that same thing, even base. I mean, there's not much else that's in that price range.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to cross shop with, and definitely if you start talking used market, you can definitely GT car.
Yeah. And let's say let's take the $30,000 away for a second. Just say you bought a basement. There's no such thing as a basement one, I guess, at $155,000. But say you bought a basement C4S or something like that and didn't option anything else on it except what they would give you. And that's still 155 grand. That's still a ton of money.
Yeah.
Still a ton.
I mean, yep. I mean, it's not an investment at all.
You can go get a clean 993 turbo for less than that now.
Yep.
Way less. I mean, you could probably put 30 grand in your pocket and get one.
And it would still be holding at that same price for a long time, if not appreciating.
And I mean, I think that's what I mean. I don't have the specs in front of me, but I think that's like almost 380 horsepower in that car. Like they're saying from the factory, you do a little bit of exhaust, a little bit of tune, you're over 400, easy.
That's enough. And then you do what you were talking about, lightweight the car and take stuff out if you're really concerned about it, but it's still GT enough.
Yeah.
Where it's comfortable and it's still fast enough to know.
Absolutely.
To feel that way.
And you're nostalgia enough, right? Like,
exactly.
So maybe that's what's keeping these people in the air cooled, like me in that area, because I just see more value there. I'm just like, well, you know what? You guys are going to keep pumping out these huge water cooled monsters, like I said, I'm not discrediting like Porsche design or their engineering, and it's a gorgeous car and everything looks great. That price is shocking, man. But enough about that. That's a ton of stuff, with that car, and it's a great car, and I'm excited to see one in person, and I'm happy for Porsche that they're continuing to make the 911.
Yeah, we might see one this weekend though. If there's a new dealership opening up not too far from us.
Oh, for sure. I'm sure they would have one there without a doubt.
We'll report back next episode on how it looked. If we feel the same, if that price is still whoa.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see if we'll report back and see if it's worth it. Well, that's about it for this episode. We're about out of time, but moving forward, hey, go to our Instagram at PCar Talk. We'll have pictures on there posted, every time we're going to record. So you can go ahead and, post some questions, Porsche related, some things that you're curious about. And we'll definitely try to get to your questions and get them on towards the end of the segment here, and answer any questions you may have regarding Porsche or anything about us, maybe, long as it's not too personal.
Yeah, I'm open.
Yeah. Aaron's open. But thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of PCAR Talk. Connect with us on Instagram at PCAR Talk or online at pcartalk.com.